Okay, so this is technically, I think, day 4 of Shema Koleinu, or session 4. Session 4.
It's gonna be a session like 6.
Well, session 6 of Tefilah.
Okay.
The section 4 of session 4 of Shema Tefilah. We have a specific goal this time. Okay, we're gonna just focus on this line of Shema Koleinu ad Hashem Elokeinu. Okay, and the background. So we did the Abu Diram, and he said that this comes from pesukim Devarim of Chav Vav Zayin. Vayishma Hashem es Koleinu, and that's from the Vidui Bikurim, which is what we use to do Sibur Yitzis Mitzrayim. Okay, so this is very thematically appropriate because we're in Pesach season now. Okay, right? So we'll just quickly review it here, but we're really going to focus on something else. So on the actual event that this is talking about. So V'nitzach el Hashem Elokeinu v'seinu, we cried out to Hashem, the God of our fathers, Vayishma Hashem es Koleinu, and Hashem heard our voice, Vayar es onyenu ve'es amalinu ve'es lachatenu, and he saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, sometimes I have started preparing a shiur or have written entire articles and then realized that I had given a shiur on that or written an article on that before. So I was preparing this with Jonah Mishan over Shabbos. And as I'm preparing, I'm like, this sounds familiar. And he's like, yeah, I feel like I've heard you give shiur on this. And we couldn't figure out what it was. We thought for a long time. And I realized I gave shiur on this a year ago, almost to the week, called What Triggered the Geula. I guess it was a Chumash shiur, and it was on the Sforno. Okay. So I wanted to try to find the pshat of this, but Sforno is just the best pshat that I know of. So if you heard that shiur, then this is gonna be a chazara, and it was good for me to do chazara. If you didn't hear the shiur, then this will be new and this will be awesome. But our goal is different than that shiur, because our goal then was to understand the Sibur Yitzis Mitzrayim. Our goal here is to try to understand this line. Okay.
I was gonna say that looks like the Sforno PDF.
It's not. It's not. Okay, you are here. I called to see if you're coming to shiur.
Oh.
Yeah. Because it's like 5 minutes after shiur started. Yeah. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna switch into Sforno mode. Okay. And I don't know if I've gushed about Sforno yet this year, but Sforno is incredible, and this is gonna be an example of just how he just gives you everything that you need in small comments to put together to assemble a whole understanding. Okay. So it's only 3 pesukim that we're doing, but I'll tell you the method that we're gonna do. Okay. So we're going to try to understand the pesukim through the Sforno, but wherever he quotes another pasuk, we're going to look at the Sforno on that. Okay, and we have I think I talked about this in shiur recently. The new edition of Sforno that came out, not new edition, sorry, the new commentaries of Sforno. I feel like I brought this up. Did I bring this up in shiur? I did, yeah.
Megillah, right?
Not on Megillah, I don't think. But I just want to read it for those who weren't there and also for the recording. So AlHaTorah released something called Shiuri Rav Ovadia Sforno. Okay, this is earlier this year. Rav Ovadia Sforno was a major Torah scholar and leader of Italian Jewish community during the first half of the 16th century. His Torah commentary is well known and included in most standard Mikros Gedolos. As a biblical, I can't commit here to Ashkenaz or Sephardic. As a biblical exegete, philosopher, and decisive of Jewish law, physician, mathematician, and more, Sforno was an embodiment of a Renaissance scholar. Now, what if we could travel back in time and experience what it was like to sit in Sforno's classes? And what if we could watch Sforno writing his commentaries, crossing out, refining, and adding material between the lines? Okay. Now we can. Well, it turns out that we can indeed have something almost like both of these singular and exciting experiences, as well as the ability to study commentaries of Sforno, which were completely unknown until very recently. All of this is due to the survival of 2 unique manuscripts and the efforts of our friend Rabbi Moshe Kravitz. The first manuscript is an autograph. I assume that doesn't mean just autograph. I don't know. He wrote it himself, I think, which includes Sforno's first draft of his Torah commentary with copious edits, as well as his commentaries on Yonah, Chavakuk, and Treyasar, and his heretofore unknown commentary on half of Yeshayahu. The second manuscript contains the notes from Sforno's lectures on Torah and Tehillim recorded by a student in the margins of a copy of the first printing of Ralbag's Torah commentary, which I think is amazing. Wow. So he's got his Ralbag, and he's taking notes, because I think Ralbag's Torah commentary was one of the first things printed in the printing presses for Jewish stuff, which is very weird, as well as a transcription of Sforno's previously unknown commentary on Ruth. Over the last several years, Moshe Kravitz has produced exquisite editions of the special contents of both of these manuscripts, and we are extremely fortunate that most of these annotated editions are now available in Mikros Gedolos. So Rav Kravitz, as a Ger Chassid, is currently completing his dissertation on the commentaries of a student of Sforno who took the notes, and he is also the newest member of the AlHaTorah team. So I was so excited because when I gave this shiur, these things were not available, and there were questions that we had. And then I looked at this after Shabbos, and I was like, Sforno answers these in things that we've never seen from the Sforno. It really is like getting like just new material from a Rishon who's been dead for 500 plus years. Yeah, Isaiah?
I just wanted to say that I feel like the person who wrote what you just read had a lot of fun writing it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you could feel excited.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna use both of the sets of commentaries. Okay, so focus on these three pesukim, and I made them bigger than the other ones, so we can differentiate between regular Sforno and then like it's not so much bigger. Okay, whatever. Okay, so here we go. So this is in Shemos second parak. Okay, right after Moshe marries Tzipporah. Okay, before the sneh. Okay, the sneh is in parak Gimel. It was in those many days. Vayamas melech Mitzrayim, the king of Egypt died. Ve'anchu bnei Yisrael min ha'avodah, and the children of Israel sobbed. Okay, like anacha with the shofar. All right, so we're just take note here. I put there's 4 terms we need to understand. Vaye'anchu, that's sobbing from the work. Vayizaku, and they cried out, za'aka. Vata'al shav'asam el ha'elokim min ha'avodah, and their outcry, their shava'a, which is not the most common word in for outcry. Okay, we do use it sometimes in Tefilah. Went up to God, to Elokim from the avodah. Vayishma Elokim es na'akasam, and Elokim heard their na'aka, which is an even rarer word. Okay, for outcry. Maybe you should use a different word for this. We'll figure it out. Vayizkor Elokim es briso es Abraham es Yitzchak es Yaakov, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Vayar Elokim es bnei Israel, and God saw the children of Israel. Vayed Elokim, and God knew. Now, can you see why? Who did attend this year last year? This year that I gave on these pesukim? Anyone? Oh, good. So this is all new. Okay, good. Maybe I can't tell. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, you can tell this is very complicated. Yeah. Okay, right? So like, I should have done this before. And if I asked you, why did God redeem the Jews from Egypt? What would you have said? Okay, but if I said what specific thing
prompted it?
Yeah, prompted the redemption. Like, what is the thing that
they're at the 49th level of Tua.
No.
Their outcry. That I mean, his second it seems like.
No, sorry. If I'd asked you before you saw these pesukim, what would you have naturally said? I think there's a answer that I think we would have said. Where do we know about the Yetzias Mitzrayim in the first place? Where in Abraham? Yeah, bris bein Mitzrayim, right?
I guess when I said Sforno, I meant like the bris avos. That's what I meant to say.
So then I would have asked you which bris, and you would have said the bris bein Mitzrayim, right? Okay, yeah. So keep that in mind, right? But we would have said, I think, that in it says in Bereshis chapter 15, not very many pesukim. We'll just review them really quickly. That Avram asks, "How do I know that I'll inherit the land?" And so God makes him split the parts, and He says, "V'yomer la Avram yado teda ki ger yihi ezarcha be'eretz lo lahem va'avadum v'ino osam arba me'el shana." Right? That's Yetzias Mitzrayim. Then you should surely know that your offspring will be a stranger in a land not theirs, and they will serve them, and they will afflict them for 400 years. And also the nation that they will serve, I will judge. So I would have said, God told Abraham that they're going to be enslaved. It doesn't say Mitzrayim, but whatever. And God took them out because He promised Abraham that He would take them out, right? But then you read these pesukim, okay? So now, what would you say? Okay, what would you say prompted God to take them out?
Their outcry.
Okay, that's part of it.
Well, it says He remembered.
All right. So here's the chain. Right? Yeah. Right. There's a chain. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Vayishma Elokim es Vatal shav asam el Elokim min havoda. Their outcry from the work went up to God.
Right.
Okay. Vayishma Elokim es na'akasam. God heard their na'aka. Then that triggered Vayizkor Elokim es briso, es Abraham es Yitzchak es Yaakov, which is not the bris bein Mitzrayim, because that was just with Abraham. Okay, right? Vayar Elokim es bnei Israel, and then somehow implied as a result of this, God saw bnei Israel, Vayed Elokim, and He knew. It really is very complicated. Okay, and again, in the Chumash here, I went into in depth into how this works, but we're going to focus on the Tefilah terms here. Okay, so our goal is going to be to understand what is the anacha, what is the zaka, what is the shava, and what is the na'aka. Okay, the na'aka, and then what does this? And our ultimate goal is to understand what does this show about Vayishma Hashem Koleinu, because you read our summary of it and it almost is embarrassingly oversimplified, right? When we talk about this, we lump all of that together under Vayishma Hashem es Koleinu, which is even stranger because why?
Because
we use Elohim over there, right? Hashem is not even involved in that. Yeah, Yukiv Vavke is Midas Rachmim, right? It doesn't sound like there's Rachmim here, based on the original pesukim. Elohim is din, yeah, right? And not only that, Shmias Koleinu is not even a term that is used in those pesukim. Koleinu is not used, and Shmia is not used, right? So it's just like it's a weird summary. So and then we have to understand how this factors into Tefilah. David, did you want to ask something?
I was going to ask something.
Okay. Yeah. And I think the Shem Hashem is important here. Okay, I mean it makes sense why they would use the Shema Hashem, why the Torah would use the Shema Hashem in these pesukim in chapter 2. Why?
He wasn't revealed to anybody at Zukiva. Yeah,
that's a good point. That's not what I was going to say, but that's a good point, right? That's in Vaskanan. But just given the context, why would Midas Adin be an appropriate?
An appropriate?
Yeah, why would it be an appropriate thing here?
Because I mean they weren't. It wasn't.
But they deserved it.
Right. It would be like a Schagonish kind of thing where like the Mitzrayim did X and then there was Y, and then the natural consequence of that should be that they should be taken out of the picture. Right.
It sounds like it reads as very contractual, like a clause was triggered in the contract to like bring it up, Yeah.
Well, I mean, couldn't you also? I mean, you could have also said that like if we use like the Permitus Rachamim,
yeah,
this would also be appropriate because like. This remember it.
Right. So if it said UK Vavke, I would not like be shocked or surprised. I would also read it as Midas Rachmim.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the derech you have to use with the Shemos Hashem, that like it's very hard to answer many times why it couldn't have used the other one. For example, like why is the first parak of Bereshis use Elohim? Plain shot.
I feel like I have like 3 different things that are going on.
Oh, we'll just give one of them.
It's like pure Midas Adin.
Yeah, right.
There was no.
Right, it's all laws of nature, right?
Yeah.
But let's say it had used Yud Vavke. What could you have said for why the account of the creation uses Yud Vavke?
Rachman for God to create.
Yeah, right. It's like Olam Chesed Yibani. So it's like I feel like you can only take what you're given and work with that, but you can't like justify why it had to use this term. Yeah,
it's like 7 8 days kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly, right. Not quite. You're talking like the Rambam's idea of because that is saying it is arbitrary.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I mean, we're saying that post facto, the fact.
I'm saying like right,
shows it is
right. And same way as like we do with Tam and Mitzvos, you can look at let's say mezuzah or tefillin and explain a Tam for that, but you can't say why couldn't God have designed it in another way and gotten this Tam in another way. Yeah. Okay. So let's do the Sforno. Okay. And I also have to just endorse this Sforno. I think I also quoted this recently that in the Judaism Demystified podcast episode interview with Rabbi Sachs, he mentioned he mentioned that if there's only one, he was asked if there's only one commentary that you had to recommend to someone for Chumash, what would it be? And he said Sforno because he is concise, he is clear, and he's rational.
I think also it's easy to read.
And it's easier to read. Yeah.
Translation.
He's creative, yeah, and there's translation, yeah. Okay, so here we go. And speaking of translation, because I prepared this for Chumash year last year, I translated all the Sfornos, so I think it'll make it more efficient. Okay, so in those many days, from the day that Moshe fled Egypt in his youth until Gershom was born, that was when in those many days Paro died. For then Moshe was close to 80 years old because Eliezer was born on Moshe's mission of God to Egypt, at which point he was 80, it didn't hit me until this year that Gershom and Eliezer were like 80 years difference, or not 80 years difference, but like many decades. Yeah. Okay, fine. So in those many days, the king of Egypt died. So the king of Egypt died, that king who had pursued Moshe, which is why he named his son afterwards Eliezer, because then he knew that he had escaped and was saved from the sword of Paro. Okay, this is just context, not for our question. Okay, they cried out. Za'aku mike'ev lev al avodasan. They cried out from psychological anguish about over their labor, as it says, wail, O gate, cry out, O city. Okay, so that's vayizaku. Okay, so already he kind of skipped over one term, anacha, right? Okay, so we'll have to like infer what that is. Okay, so zaka is crying. Actually, let's do all of them first. Yeah,
it's very strange that he says in his parish there, right? That he says Zaku. What was it?
Let me go back to where is it? Here.
Right. It says Zaku Mikav Lev
Yeah.
Al Avodasam when the pasuk links the avoda to anacha.
Yes. Okay. So that's actually a clue. Okay. Because first of all, I think you could read that both of them are related because it does say the Anchum Israel min ha'avoda v'yizaku.
Oh, is that the drop?
Let's see. Shemos. Phase. Drop. But yeah, Vayizaku.
Okay.
Vayizaku. Yeah. Okay, right.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So so let's just keep that in mind here. All right. Yeah.
One thing also, I just wouldn't have thought to link the psychological to the labor as much as like some other, like I feel like physical pain would be the labor and like psychological would be subservience.
Good call. So it would be in our interest to understand what psychologically was going on here, right? Because K'ev Lev, you're right, is not like avodas parach, like the backbreaking labor. It was pain about the work, right? So just to set the stage, I mean, obviously being enslaved is no fun, but why, when the king of Egypt died, did they cry out in pain from the work? Like, why did that elicit a greater like sobbing and crying? Because it doesn't say that like they were crying and sobbing the whole time. The pesukim make it sound like the king died and then they cried out because of the work.
Maybe on a couple of things. Maybe one is that like they thought that they would get a break,
right?
But then like it just doesn't come. Like
yeah.
It's like redemption. And then like, nope.
Yeah.
I feel like that would like
roll
over.
Yeah. And also you don't know who's the next king. I mean,
right. It's also true, although it's interesting that the pasuk doesn't talk about the rise of the next king yet, but I do think that there's like this hope that it's going to be, things are going to change now, and then when the hopes are dashed, then that creates pain, and then that makes the pain of what they're doing even worse. Yeah, Isaiah?
Isn't there also the thing about the new king not knowing Yosef?
That was the first new king. Yeah, right. Yeah, there's really 3 or 2 kings in the story, right? There's the king who enslaves Bnei Israel. I guess it depends on which story. There's the king who Yosef was buddies with, right? Then there is the new king who's either new king or new decrees. He enslaves the Jews. Then that king dies here, and then the third king is the one that Moshe talks to during the entire Makos.
And we're certain that those are different kings.
We're certain that this one and the one, this one he actually dies because that's what. And then Hashem tells Moshe, the people who saw your soul are your life are dead, and you can go back now.
She said something differently now.
I don't know.
Like this one?
For this one?
This is AlHaTorah.
No, this one doesn't he say he just got Saras or something?
Oh yeah. Rashi. Let's see what Rashi says. Vayamas is Chav Gimel. Yeah, that's not shot. Yeah, right. I assume it's drush. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you mean that he didn't literally shech the. Or you're saying like the fact that he's.
That's what I meant by drush then.
Oh, I mean, I think it's drush, right? Yeah,
just like
not like a tradition. I don't think. Yeah.
That he actually had Saras.
Oh, that I think that's a total drush. I think. Yeah.
Really?
I assume so. Yeah. I mean, I haven't learned the Rashi, but I assume so.
Plus, it says he dies. So.
Yeah.
I know, but like.
Yeah. Shaz they died. Okay, let's go with that. Okay. All right. And he named his son Eliezer, right? Because God, the king of pursued Moshe, right? I mean, that's okay. Whatever. All right. Anyway. Okay. So then they cry.
Is that what he says though? Is that what he says when he named him?
Okay. Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. Now you could say that he got Saras, let me do tshuva, and that's why. Yeah. All right. Vatal, so that's Zaka. Vatal Shavasim El Elokim in Avoda. Their Shavah to Elokim went up from the Avoda. Lo bishvil to Shuvasim utfilasam. Not because of their tshuva and their tefillah. Okay. Ayala, you notice, wait, was this Ayala's question? Yeah, that he's pairing tshuva and tefillah. Okay. Aval kimakane al achzarius hama'avidim. But because God is zealous against the cruelty of the oppressors, because he says it to Moshe at the snare, I also have seen the oppression. Okay, so what is God responding to here? Oppression, right? What does that remind you of God responding to the oppression? We've talked about a pasuk about that recently, many times.
The one, the Shema, the one that did with
retracting, yeah, right. So Mishpatim, right, by the widows and orphans,
yeah,
right. That it's got that. Okay, thank
Is it
you.
also like with Garam also?
It's not in this puzzle.
Yeah, it's not in this puzzle, but the same principle.
Okay.
Which puzzle?
It's 17 through 22.
Thank you.
I think you're thinking of a different thing.
No,
No,
am I wrong?
yeah, I
Oh,
think
Yeah, it's
21.
you tet.
Oh, I'm still close.
Wait, you
Yeah.
tet.
I know that's
Oh no, it's chaf aleph. Yeah, you were close. Yeah, close enough.
24, I was off by
Kol almana v'yasam lo ta'anun. Do not afflict any widow or orphan. Im anes aneo. So if you will afflict him, ki im tza'oki tzake lai. If he will cry out to me, shamoa eshma tzakaso. I will hear his outcry. I will surely hear his outcry. B'chara api, and I will be angry. My wrath will blaze. B'haraki eschem b'charav, and I'll kill you by the sword. B'hayun neshechem almanos v'uvnei yisomim. And your wives will be widows, and your children will be orphans. So that's not because the widows and the orphans are righteous. That's God being Makane al-Hachzarim, that he sees oppression going on and he responds, right? Just the way the pesukim talk about it. Okay.
Which in a sense kind of makes it even stranger that it's like Mios and Din doing that. Does that mean to say that it's a natural consequence?
It's a good question. What we get from the Midas Din thing, yeah. I mean, it's definitely Din in a simple sense in that he is he's doing mishpat, right? Like mishpat against wrongdoers. Okay, now we supplement this with the new Sforno manuscript that was released here, who explains the anacha. Okay, so he says, "Va'anchu b'nei Yisrael min ha'avoda vayizaku." I forgot to translate. And they cried out. These were the masses who cried out. And I think at this point I realized it's not from the avoda, but it's because of the words. The mem as the causative. Okay, because of the avoda. They were not moved to daven. Okay. Likewise, likewise, is written their outcry went up to Elohim because of the work, because of the difficulty of the work, not because of their own merit. Okay. So is that okay? Yeah. So let's. Similarly, in Shemos Gimel test when Hashem is talking to Moshe, the atahine ta'akas b'nei Yisrael ba'a elai v'gamra isi es halachat asher mitzrayim lochatzim osam. So he uses the word tza'aka here, which is another term which we did not have. Okay, we had za'aka. Behold, the outcry of the children of Israel has come up to me, and I've also seen the oppression that Egypt is oppressing them. So v'gamra isi es halachatz mitzad rov halachatz roy la'anosh es halochatzim. Because of the great oppression, it's fit to punish the oppressors. K'inyan, as it says in Zechariah, a great wrath against the complacent nations, who, when I became slightly wrathful, augmented evil. I don't know what that's adding. And in the new Sfornos, it says, I guess it's the old if it's a draft. Because of the difficulty and weight of the oppression, they were also aroused. I don't know how that's said. Min hahamon, right? So it's the masses calling out. Okay. So far, what do we have?
Well, we have a psychological outcry.
Right. So this is the psychological outcry.
And then we have just him helping because it's just thing to do.
Right. So that is the shava, right? That is the Vatal Shavasam. Right. That the shava is crying out not in Tefilah and Teshuvah, but because of the oppressors. Okay. And the anacha, I mean, he said that in the Dibur Maskil of anacha also, that they groaned, they sobbed, right? So what would you just say if you had to give an explanation? Because he's not directly explaining anacha here.
Physical?
Yeah, it sounds like it's very close to the cave lave, like, so let's just say the sorrow from the work, okay, from the labor. And then I do think our pshat makes sense. Psychological outcry from the work and the disillusionment of the new king, right? Okay, so far we don't have any tefillah that God is like actively listening to. And it's funny, even the way that it describes the shavah, it went up to God from the shavah. Yeah.
If anything, like the way that this Sforno is explaining it, it sounds like he's saying that there's almost like two ways that you could be saved.
Yeah.
It's either you merit it through tshuva and
Yeah.
tefilah, or those who are oppressing you are so bad that they merit that they get destroyed.
Right. And in this case, it does seem like it's both. Okay. Yeah. All right. So because we will see the naka. Okay. The naka's the good one. Spoiler alert. Okay. So then we have here. All right. No, we did that already. Okay. Vayishma Elokim es naakasam. So God heard. This is still Elokim heard their naaka. Tfilas ktsasam, the prayer of some of them. Shehis palalu az tzadike hador. The righteous people of the generation davened then. Kamru v'nitzak el Hashem vayishma Koleinu. Okay, this is my trivia question from last year. Okay, where is this Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim? What's the context of this in Bamidbar 2016? It's the most unknown Sipur. It might be in Balak.
No.
Yeah, I think it's Kukas. Yeah.
With Aaron and Miriam dying and
the bad stuff. Yeah. Or here's a better question: who is that Sipur told to? It's the strangest thing. Most people don't even remember it. I totally don't remember because it's in the part of the thing where you can zone out. Not you can't zone out, where you do zone out. Okay, you'll see why. Okay, so this is 2:16. Vayishlach Moshe malachim mikadesh el melech Edom. Okay, Komar achicha Yisrael atah yadata is kol hatala asher matzasnu. So he's sending messengers to the king of Edom. Thus says your brother Israel, you know all the misfortune that has befallen us. V'yirdu avosinu mitzrayma v'neshev b'mitzrayim yamim rabim v'yaredu lana mitzrayim v'avosinu v'nitzak el Hashem v'yishma Koleinu. Right, so it's a little Sipur that we tell to the king of Edom, which it was not on my radar. Very strange. Yeah. So it's strange that Sforno quotes that one and not the one in Kisava, which has the exact same lashon of. I guess this says v'nitzak, but that's probably why he quotes it actually. Okay, because we'll see. All right, then vayizkor lakim es. So this is the tzaddikim davening. Vayizkor lakim es briso shnemar. Oh, so now which bris did we say that he remembered? When I asked you like which bris did you say? Right, bris ben Asarim. So check this out. Okay, this blew open the area. Vayizkor lakim es briso amar v'hakimosi es brisi beini uveinecha uvein zaracha acharecha lios lacha lelokim ulazaracha acharecha. Which bris is that?
That it looks like
Brachis Yud Zayin, and bris ben Asarim is in 15.
Right.
Is that with Yaakov?
No, the Yaakov's not alive yet. Was it? Yes, this is the bris Milah bris. Okay, so the bris that, according to Sforno, the bris that actually gets us out of Mitzrayim, oddly enough, is not the bris bein of Asarim. And in fact, if you look back at the bris bein of Asarim, what was the purpose of the bris bein of Asarim?
To reassure Avraham
that what?
That he will have the land.
That he'll have the land, right? So this bris is saying, just based on the thing that he's quoting here, what is this bris promising?
That descendants. And that God will be
that Hashem will be a God to you and to your offspring. Okay. And then what's the nafkamina? Now why do we care about this bris? V'zeh yaseh b'chol kareinu elav. And this will happen whenever we call out to God. Okay, which is what we did in the Rambam in saying the purpose of the Megillah is kimi goy gadol asher lo elokim krovim lav b'chol kareinu elav. Okay, so this bris, one of the contractual benefits of this bris is we get listened to when we cry out to God. Okay. Kamo shehid achar kach ba'amro v'gam ani shamati es na'akas b'nei Yisrael v'gomer v'ezkor es brisi. In Hashem's talk with Moshe at the sneh, he also says, wait, is this at the sneh? No, this is later on. This is before he goes to starts doing all the ozos. That I also heard the outcry of the children of Israel, and I remember my covenant. Yeah.
Another question: weren't we already leaving when we were in Mitzrayim?
Yeah, it seems to be because we need to get bris milah for Korban Pesach.
Right? Okay, so it's like a little funny then, like the brief that is helping us.
It is true.
We're not giving our side.
Right, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah,
I mean that's what you had.
And if they were the ones who were crying out, I'm sure if they were the
Tzaddik Gedor, right? That's right. Okay, so that's a very good question though. But I think that's a possible answer. But that is a great question. Okay, all right. So now we have the final picture, which is the na'aka, and then we also see that the Sforno calls this sa'aka, okay, because when he quoted the Melech Edom story, he said the na'aka and the ta'aka. So that is the Tefilah that the minority of the small group of tzaddikim davened right? And that's what God listened to, and that's what triggered the bris. Okay, yeah. You see what I mean? How Sforno is just piecing together this picture here. Okay, let's look at the shiurim commentaries and see if there's any here. We read this already. Yeah. Shiuri Rav Ovadia Sforno. Umash Amar Vayishma Elokim Esna Akasam Al Osam Hayoser Tzadikim Shayim Mispalim Lelokim. So those are the ones who are more righteous who daven to God. And then he says an interesting thing, which I don't know if it plays out. V'lechein bezakas hahamon ksiv bezayin v'lo b'tzadi. Ki lo haya Tefilah kamoshin mora milas tza'aka b'tzadi. So he's saying a rule here, saying that tza'aka is Tefilah, zaka is just like crying out in pain. Okay, I feel like we use zaka sometimes for Tefilah also, but maybe he's taking a stance here.
Call it Tefilah zaka?
Are you talking about like for the Yom and Rhyme thing? Yeah. That's zaka, with a chaf and a hey. That's a Tefilah of purity. Yeah, yeah. Hold on just a second. I now I gotta check the zaka.
See now I would know.
Yeah. Hold on.
Oh no, you're
What's
I'm not the one who said Tefilah Zaka and Zaka.
If you were smart, you wouldn't be saying Tefilah Zaka because that's an Ashkenazic thing anyway. Where's the Rambam saying Tinios? I think he says Lizok, not Litzok. That's interesting. Oh, so yeah, the doofus says Litzok. There's a lot of stuff here.
Who says?
The doofus. The doofus Rambams, yeah. Okay. Okay. So okay, yeah. All right. So now what do we have to understand?
Seriously, those are the ones that they used to burn.
It's probably factually true. That was the burning of those Rambams was known for printing the yeah. Chas v'shalom. Yeah. All right. Okay, so now what's the next step that we have to understand here? Because we've done all the pesukim, the Sfornos on these pesukim. So what do we have to understand in order to understand like why God answered our tefillos? Where would you go next?
The pesukim and the other.
Where?
Pesukim.
Which pesukim?
I'm sorry.
The pesukim and the other pesukim. I mean, I can't disagree with that.
Where would you go?
We have the Sforno here. We have to understand the bris, right? We have to understand the bris, right? So what does it mean? I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you to be a God for you and your offspring after you, right? Okay, so now we're going to go on an adventure. You feel like the adventure had already begun. This is the adventure now. Okay, so Sforno. So okay, so I'll show you the pesukim first of all in 17. Even though we're not going to do the Sforno on all of them. So Vayhi Avram ben Tishim Shana V'Seisha Shanim. So when Avram was 99, Vayira ad Hashem el Avram. Hashem appeared to Avram. Vayimar elav, and he said, Ani kel shakai. I am kel shakai, the God who is sufficient. Right. That's the literal translation. His halech lefanai v'hi esamim. How would you translate that?
Shall walk.
Yeah, his halech is a weird one, right? I think it literally means make yourself walk. Lefanai before me, and then was tamim.
Complete.
So I would have translated as complete also, but then I translate in Mishlei for the Tom personality and for korbanos. There's a special connotation. There's like shalim, which also means complete, but tamim means something different.
Oh,
what kind of perfection?
Bodily, physically.
Okay, in what way though? In what way? Because with korban, I think is the easiest way to see.
Right.
It's like pure.
In what sense? He said pure.
Like tower, kind of.
No, not tower, because we're talking physical.
Made perfect from any blemish.
Yeah, free of blemishes. Okay, so I saw that Imanovetsky translates it as faultless, which I think is actually a good translation here. Okay, so as opposed to shalim is like actualized or like developed in line with an ideal, tamim is faultless. Okay,
like a lack of perfection.
A lack of imperfection.
A lack of imperfection.
Yeah, right, correct. Yeah, yeah. Unlike that sentence, yeah. That's not receiving so I will place my covenant between me and you, and I will increase your offspring a lot. If you want a shiur about how Ma'od is not gematria for Muhammad, then listen to Rabbi Fader's shiur on the Ibn Ezra on that, right? Right, because this is one of the places where the Ibn Ezra says that you can make gematria say anything you want. So he says that the Muslims want to say that this is nevuah from Muhammad because ma'od.
About like the Muhammad.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I don't know what they say. Vayipol Avram al panav vaydaber ito Elokim lemor ani hine brisi itach v'hayisi la'av hamon goyim. Behold, my covenant is with you. I will make you into the father of many peoples. Lo yikare od es shimcha Avram v'haya shimcha Abraham ki av hamon goyim nesaticha. V'ifreisi oscha b'mod me'od u'nesaticha l'goyim u'malachim milcha yiteo. Okay, so all these multiplicities. Okay, then we get to our passage. Kimosi es brisi beinu v'necha v'enzarcha acharacha l'dorasam livrisolam lihios lecha le'lekim u'lezarcha acharacha. V'nasati lecha u'lezarcha acharacha es eretz megurecha kol eretz Canaan la'achuzas alam v'hayisi lahem le'lekim. Okay, which is a little bit of a repetition of the bris beinu b'sarim because he's talking about the land. Okay, so what does all this mean? So check out these beautiful sfornos here. Okay. Walk before me, walk wherever you turn before me as one who gazes at me to know my way in accordance with what is possible for you in the sense of I have placed Hashem before me continually. Okay. Okay. Now what does it mean to be faultless? I got to read in Hebrew because it's better. Acquire the perfection which is possible for the human species. Haskil v'yado osi. Comprehending and knowing me, dias drachai, through knowing my ways, and emulating me as much as possible. Right? Just Sforno just talking about, what does it mean to be perfect? It means to have knowledge of God through His ways that you emulate. Right? Couldn't have said it better unless I were Yirmiyahu or the Rambam. Okay, okay. I mean, they say it pretty good too. Ki amnam. Because emotions are bad. That line stuck in my head. Okay. He's explaining now how knowing God's ways is the only way you can know Him, because the actions of the thing point to the form. That's what Moshe says. Teach me your ways that I will know you, which means that the way to know God is through His ways. This is the ultimate perfection for the human species. And that's what the intent is in God creating man. As it says, let us make man in our form like our likeness. You looked quizzical there.
I don't see how that last line seems like non-sequitorial.
Okay. Non-sequitorial? Okay. That's a good one. Yeah, meaning that it doesn't seem to fit in. Okay. So we have to go to my favorite Sforno. Okay. Yeah, I knew this would not be a one-night shiur. no, I really want to finish it, but there's a lot of Sfornos here. Okay, this is the best Sforno in my opinion. Okay, this is where he defines human perfection and what it means to be a Telem Elokim. I think we did this earlier in the year, maybe. I can't remember. Oh, I did this in the women's shiur, I think. Okay, so here he says like this. Is this ringing any bells? No. I mean, I know the pasuk does, but
yeah.
Okay, B'Tselem Elokim, hine milas Elokim, or Elohim, I should say. Al tzad hahidamus tomar al kol etzem sichli b'foal. Okay, so the word Elohim means, or here it said by way of analogy, to any rational, actual essence. Okay, or essence that is rational in actuality. Shalem, perfected. Nivdal mechomer, separate from matter. Ubezehu nitzchi behereach. And through that, it is of necessity eternal. Okay, so Elohim means rational, separate from matter, perfected essence, which will be eternal. Okay? Therefore, Tomar al-Hakel Yisbarach al-Malachav. That's why we say it about God, because God is rational, separate from matter, and perfected and eternal. And that's why we say it about His angels, because they are also not, Lahavio, but they're rational and separate from matter and eternal. Okay? Ukumo Kain Tomar al-Hashoftim al-Shem ha-Chelik ha-Sichli ha-Roi behem. And this is also why we call Shoftim Elohim, right? Why? Because we're calling them that because of the rational part that is in them. Okay, that can you imagine? Just take a step back. If we had this idea, and imagine if the word we had for English judges was rational beings, right? Like we're trying to emphasize, we're going to place our judgment before rational beings, who transcend materiality. Like, yeah, if only, right? Hashiva Shoftenu. Okay. However, and then here's the beautiful pshat. Okay. Bihios ki asechal hanushi alpha pi shepulas haskalaso he bilti shum kli chomri v'titz pashet al bilti muchash. So the human intellect, even though its activity of its intellection is not through any material agent or through any material faculty, v'titz pashet al bilti muchash, and it could relate to non-sensory things. V'alktsas asidos, and uncertain future things. That's like nevuah. V'lo yichalish b'harboso p'ulos haskalaso, and the intellect does not get weaker the more you use intellection. I'll summarize in a second. V'lo be'es ziknas haguf, and not when you get old in your body. Aval yosif omets, but it gets stronger. Miko ele hisbar shehu nivdal mechomer b'li safek. All of this proves that it is separate from matter without a doubt. So he's giving arguments for why the intellect is not physical. Okay, one is that it can relate to non-physical things. Okay, that's like the classical proof of that ideas are non-physical, and therefore you must have some component that can relate to the non-physical. Right? You heard this before, right? Like
triangle or green or both? Yeah,
triangle. Right? Yeah, I like using shape. Right? Is that the concept of shape is not a physical. It's not a physical concept, and your mind can grasp it. Right? If I say picture shape, you can only picture particular shapes. You can't picture the idea of shape, right? Because it's not a sensory thing. So your mind relates to that. His second argument is that it doesn't get weaker as you grow older, but it gets stronger. And it also doesn't get weaker the more you use it, right? If you're lifting something, your arm gets weaker. The more you use it, it gets worn out. And same thing with your as you grow older, all your other faculties weaken, but your intellect gets stronger. Okay, and I know there's such a thing as cognitive diseases, but has to do with the fact that the intellect operates through the brain, whatever. Okay, all this proves that's not physical, but that's not his point. Okay, we said that. Kodem sheis bonin, before man contemplates, before he gets tuna, biosa az mishulo mikol shlemus asher huchan lo, when he is void of any perfection that he was prepared for, lo yikare Elohim, man cannot be called Elohim. Aval yikare selem Elohim bilvad. So he learns, not like the Rambam, where selem means essence. He learns selem to mean like a reflection or only something that's similar to Elohim. Okay, bilvad. Ad yikne shlebus, until he gets perfection. Bifrat b'chachma asher ba yikne avas hakel v'yiraso, especially through the wisdom through which he acquires love of God and fear of God. Az yihi etzem sichli b'foal, then he will be a rational essence in actuality. Shalim, perfect, nivdal mechomer, separate from matter. Umizeh yischayev shihi nitzchi v'kayam gam achrei misas haguf. Then he'll be eternal after his body dies. Okay, so what he's saying is you start off as just a tselem Elohim, that you have the capacity to get knowledge, and then once you actualize that, then you can be called Elohim, which is like what we call judges, and then your soul is eternal. Since it's within man's free will to acquire perfection by striving to understand Chachma, that was mentioned. This is the word koach from this morning, right? Then if man withholds himself from this, then he will remain in potentiality, his intellect will remain in potentiality. Okay, Mishula mikol shlemus b'fal, void of any perfection in actuality, like he was in the beginning. V'yale b'tohu b'yovad, and he'll go up to nothingness and be destroyed. Amru, as it says, Adam b'kar v'lo yavin nimshal b'hemus ninvo. It says, man in his glory who does not understand is compared to the animals. All of this God was indicating by telling Elohim. Okay, so going back now, actually we needed to do that. I'm glad you asked about it, because we need to do this. So he's saying, what does it mean to be perfect? So it means to know and comprehend God through knowing his ways and emulating him. Okay, and through doing that, we reach our purpose, which is to be Elohim, right? Is to be, we'll fulfill. We were set up with the capacity to have this tselem. Oh, we didn't read the demus part. Oh, that was earlier. Okay, really quickly. Demus, kidmuseno. So he learns demus is in regards to our actions. Our actions resemble somewhat the angels, because they act with knowledge and recognition. But their action is not through free will. And that's, in that sense, man is not similar to them. And in some sense, man is similar to God. Because God acts with bechira. But God's bechira is only for good. But man's bechira is not always for good. God's bechira is better than man's bechira. That's why it says like our likeness. Okay, it's a good shot, right? We are like God's likeness. The likeness is free will, but we are only like God's likeness because our free will is different than God's free will.
It still begs the question of the plural, though, right? But he's not going to.
Yeah. I think he learns, if I remember correctly, that the plural is because God is referring to himself and the angels, and God and the angels are both Elohim.
But they don't have bechira.
Oh, you mean the plural for Demuseno?
Yeah.
So I think so. That's what he's saying. Also that they act with Yediyah and Hakara.
So that's the
Ksas similarity to the angels, and the Ksas similarity to God is the is recognition. Yeah. In other words, we're partially similar to the angels because they act with knowledge and we act with knowledge, and we're partially similar to God because he acts with bechira and we act with bechira. But we're not exactly similar to either because God's bechira is always for good. And he doesn't say this, but also our action is not always with knowledge. Whereas the angels always is with knowledge. So now going back to this is what it means. This is how we were designed. So for this purpose of knowing God and then acting in a way that emulates God. Okay, so that's Tamin Tiyeh. Okay, but we got
What does it mean for us to be Elohim?
To actualize your intellect, through knowing and acting in accordance with that. In this world, yeah. And then the result of it is you'll be like Elohim, like God, or like the angels when you die, because then your body will die, but your intellect will have gained immortality through its knowledge. Yeah. Okay, but now we got to get to, hold on a second. No, there's more good stuff. Sorry. I think this is just adding the same thing in better language. This is be faultless. In other words, that everything you do for my name's sake, do not say, I do this because it's upright in the eyes of God, but rather analyze and investigate with your mind's eye why it is upright and good in my eyes. Likewise, be faultless and perfect in your intellect to investigate this continually, and the services, that looks weird in English, the avodos, which I command you, analyze what they are. Likewise, he said, knowledge, not belief. And by Noah, it says he was faultless in his generations because he applied his mind to investigate theoretical matters by way of analysis and comprehension more than the other members of his generation. He's just mapping out what perfection is here, yeah.
Also sounds like there is a matter of action alongside this.
Yes,
Not
yeah.
just we thought, but
yeah, he emphasized that in the, like the song. He emphasized that in emulating me to the extent possible for you. Yeah. And then Kid Museinu is also in Mysios. Yeah. Okay. So now, what does this have to do with being a God for you and your offspring? Okay. So he says like this, and I think this is the final piece. To be a God for you and your offspring after you, to associate my name to you without an intermediary, as it is associated with all eternal beings. As it is stated, everything that God does will last forever in Koheles 3:14. For indeed, those things which are subject to deterioration are not his act, capital H, without an intermediary. Thus, he stated that by establishing a covenant and keeping it, Abraham and his offspring would be eternal as an entity before him. Difficult language here. Let me read it in the Hebrew. Ki amnam, let's read it again. Liachet shmi aleichem bilti emtsai, to uniquely associate my name with them without intermediary. Kamoshehu misyachet al kol hanitzchim, just like God is uniquely associated with all eternal things. Ka'amro ki kol asher yas elokim hu yihye l'olam. So his premise here is like this: is things that are eternal, God relates to directly because there's no material aspect of it. Okay, but things that are subject to deterioration, you've got God interacting with it because he governs it through laws, but then there's also the physicality of it, which is something that is not forever and that has entropy and all that other stuff. So things that deteriorate, they're not God's actions without an intermediary. Okay, for those who have learned Eov, that's the Satan. Okay, it's God and the Satan combining together. Amar imkain shebahakamas habris ushmiraso yihyehu vizaro nitzchim beish lefanav. By Abraham and his offspring keeping this covenant, then they will be like an individual before God that God can relate to in the same way he relates to eternal things.
I assume this is when he says that he means post-death.
So in which case it's not K, it's just actual. Right. Here it's difficult because he's talking about the nation. The nation is God is going to relate to the nation as an individual that is eternal. Okay. Let's get a little bit of help from the Sforno Shiurim. This covenant I initiated with you, I have not established to be with you alone, but your offspring after you. And now he explained to him the substance of the covenant, saying to be a God for you, that my intended objective should be perfected in you and in your offspring after you prepare yourself to walk before me and be perfected. For my intent that you become a nation of understanding, which is a cool thing. We say Am Kadosh and Am Hanevchar. Have you ever heard of Am Binos?
No.
It's an expression in Yeshayahu. I did not know. A nation of understanding. I shall give it to you and your offspring. I will give you lands in which you can understand and comprehend ideas without toil. Likewise, the singer said, and he gave them the lands of the nations, and they inherited the toil of the regime so that they might safeguard his statutes and observe his teachings. Hallelujah. So what's the deal here? And I mean that literally, the deal. What is the covenant? Okay, like he's saying somehow Abraham should be his halach l'fnai v'hesamim, and then that we can understand on an individual level that Abraham will be following God in all of his ways and will be operating according to his Tzelem Elokim. But then he's saying, if you do that, you and your offspring do this, then I will relate to you and your offspring as an ish, which will be eternal before me and not be subject to deterioration. And the nafkamina, or the outcome of that, is God will respond to your tefillos like he responds to the tefillah of an individual. And that was b'chol kareinu elav. Okay, this is the last. No, we have one more. Sorry, so many Sfornos. Yeah.
You're saying ish, an individual?
Yeah.
I mean, my first thought when I think of ish is like a physical person.
Right.
But it seems like he's going the opposite direction.
Yeah. Ish Elokim. I mean,
right.
Yeah, right.
So does that mean that that relating to the nation as an ish doesn't mean all as one? It just means that they have the ability to become. Let
me say it in more familiar language, is that instead of relating to the nation of Israel through Hashgacha Klalis, he relates to them through Hashgacha Pratis, as a prat, in the same way, as an entity. Entity might be the better word.
Right, I think we're saying two different things still. Because it still sounds like you're saying what he's relating to with Hashgacha Pratis is the Am.
Yeah.
Versus what I was thinking was that it was each individual has the ability to have like Hashgacha Pratis to them. So
that he was saying earlier in B'Talminu Kidmusenu that you can become an Elohim. Okay. And then with Abraham, he was saying you walk before me and be Tamim. And presumably if we read the Sforno and all the stuff about multiplying offspring, that would be Hashgacha Pratis stuff. Okay, but now he's saying that the nation will get the status of being an Ish before God.
So you're saying that the status of being an Ish is Hashgacha Pratis?
It's Hashgacha Pratis on the nation. Yeah. Right. Yeah, right. That's my understanding of the Sforno. I actually I'm glad I chose this. I use my Rav Koopman Sforno with footnotes where he explains it. I'm glad I chose to not put the footnotes on here and read all the footnotes, but that's how he understands it also, that it's as an individual. Uh-huh. And remember, the Sforno quoted this pasuk, who is a great nation that has a God who is close to it, like Hashem our God whenever we call him. Kimi goy gadol. The reason it is fitting for you to be considered wise and discerning in the eyes of the people is that God is close to us whenever we call him, and this indicates that he chose us from among all the people. And if the people consider you fools, it will be a desecration of Hashem's name when they say to you, these are the people of Hashem.
It's like the Rambam's line of
Katan Sachal no Nalva Sachal Goya Katan is that. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's the opposite. Okay, this is the last one. Sorry, there's so many Sfornos. I didn't realize there's so many. V'yar Lakimus b'nei Israel. So this is after this is the final pasuk in that parak. He shgiach aleim v'lo histir pana od panav mehem. He was mashgiach on them, and he did not conceal his face from them. Inyan ki ra'isi es ami ki ba'a tza'aka so elai. Again, we have tza'aka meaning the Tefilah. Kamosha heid achar kach ba'amr bra o ra'isi es ani ami asher b'mitzrayim. I've seen the affliction of my people in Egypt. And I've seen it, I've known its pains. And now he explains also in Shemos 3:7, when he's talking to Moshe, I've heard the outcry of their people. He says, I've seen the affliction of my people, the righteous of the generation who sobbed and cried about the iniquities of the generation and about their affliction. Interesting, he says they cried about the iniquities of the generation. Hanenachim al avonos hador. Yeah, so they're not, see, that's another thing. What are the other people crying about? The hard work. Tzaddikim are crying out about the actual cause of the suffering. The actual cause of the suffering is not the Melech Mitzrayim. The actual cause is the avonos that lead to the tzara. Yeah.
I mean, I think with what you're saying of tzaddikim being like looking internally versus everybody else.
Yeah, definitely. Did we talk about that on Purim?
The two of us?
I
Yeah,
don't remember.
No.
at Rebbe's. I think there's a picture of it.
A picture of
There's a
the
picture of you guys.
There's a picture of us having a conversation, and I'm just remembering that I remember.
I know there was something else we talked about that was not that.
Okay, fine. All right. I got a moment of clarity there or of a clear memory. I mean, yeah, right. Okay. Anyway, ukenegnam nigde malach Hashem toch hasneh. Oh, this is an interesting shot of the sneh, and it was regarding them that an angel of Hashem appeared in the bush. Oh, wait. Yeah. The meaning of I've surely seen is as if to say, even though I have seen the affliction of my people in Egypt, as indicated by the angel in the bush, and even though against the tormentors I will turn a hand, as indicated by the fire in the bush, nevertheless the Egyptians who torment them will not perish utterly on account of the plagues that I send, as indicated by the statement, but the bush is not consumed. For indeed, the intent in the plagues I bring upon them is not to cut them off and establish Israel in their place, but to save Israel from their hand and establish them in another place. Right. That's not really into our shiur. That was from last year's shiur. This is the actual last one. No, it's not. Oh no, I'm sorry. And God knew the afflictions of their heart and that their Tefilah and their outcry was with all their heart. As it was recounted in the statement, for I have known its pains, which is the opposite of they sought to trick him with their mouths and deceive him with their tongues. Their hearts were not firm with him. Okay, that's like a bad kind of feel where you're trying to like manipulate God. Okay, now we get to Ve'ata hine tzaka. That's the last one. Hine tzakas b'nei Yisrael ba eliv gamra ises LOT of Sforno. And now this means it is entirely true. Okay, that's a different word of ata, which is the meaning of and now in all places. Indeed, I have known their pains and the afflictions of their heart. Behold, the outcry of the children of Israel has reached me, that I have accepted their prayers because they called out to me in truth, not in the manner of they attempted to seduce me with their mouths. Okay, now here's the thing. It seems very overwhelming, like we have too much here. And if I was giving that shiur on how the mechanics of the bris was set into motion, there's a lot we'd have to figure out. But remember, we have one question, which is what insight does this give us into Vayishma Hashem Koleinu in Shema Koleinu? Okay. And I think we don't need to review all this stuff in order to get it. I think you got it you could get it just by looking back at these 4 words here and saying, what do you get from the Sforno? Oh, let's add to here. Two of the small group of the tzaddikim that davened after recognizing that their real tzara was not from the king of Egypt, nor from their labor, but from their avonos, okay, their iniquities, which necessitated teshuvah. So again, the way to think about this kind of question is when we say Shema Koleinu, we're referring to Kisavo, Vayishma Hashem as Koleinu, and that's referring to this messy reality. So what do we see about the Shmias Koleinu in Mitzrayim that we should have in mind when we daven and say Shema Koleinu? And the irony is that that we came up with this idea last week when Aria was talking about the guy standing behind him, I think.
Oh, you mean where I wanted to, where like he was taking too long?
Yeah.
What
I said in response, yeah.
That's what I texted you about the next morning.
Yes.
What was the
You're also
response?
asking for that guy's to fill out the answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what does that have to do with this?
Oh, here the tzaddikim. Well, here also tzaddikim being on everybody's behalf, not just their own.
Correct. And what is God responding to?
He responds to that to Tzaka or the Naka.
Okay, so that's the thing. He's responding to the Naka, but the Naka pertains to the bris, which is about the entire nation. Right? Because it's, yeah.
That's just the question I asked you in text. It sounded like this also has to do with that. Tefilah and Seymour then? Yeah, remind me. You said you were going to give like a whole other shiur, and that would be with all we're learning about Tefilah and what Tefilah and Seymour, how does that work into everything? Yeah. With the context. Yeah. This is going to get to it. So let's just plant the idea here, and then we'll stop and let it percolate here. Yeah.
What is the question?
The question is what? So again, steps are Abu Dirim says Shema Koleinu. That phrase comes from Kisavo, Vayishma Hashem es Koleinu.
Okay.
That phrase in Kisavo is a description of this whole messy set of pesukim that the Sforno explained.
Yeah.
So we're trying to understand what the pasuk in Kisavo means in light of Sforno's understanding here. And then we're also trying to answer what should we be thinking of when we say the phrase Shema Koleinu.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think the basic idea is like this. I'm just going to throw this out here, okay? That the nation was crying out in different strata. There was basically two strata. There was the people who were crying out because of the work and not at all doing tshuva and tefilah, okay? And there was also, and that outcry was, so that cry in and of itself did not register before God. What's the only thing about those people's cry that made it register?
Well, the fact that the tzaddikim daven about that.
Okay, that's true, but there's something prior to that. Vatal shavasam el ha'elokim min havoda. That was not the naka, right?
The cruelty of the
oppressors, right? So in other words, so that's the thing, is that they were crying out. The fact that they were crying out itself, being in pain and crying out does not mean God listens to you. But being in pain and crying out because of oppressors means that God does listen to you. Oh. Not because of your zchus, but because God responds to justice. And by the way, two examples of this: Sodom and Amorah, right, was not Jewish cities, and God responded because of the Hamas. And then Nineveh also, God sends a Navi. This is the Radak at the beginning of Yonah says, why would God send Yonah to Nineveh when they're Assyrians? And he says, because whenever there's Hamas on earth, then God will respond because he cares about that. And you see that from the Mabul and from Sodom and Amorah and from this. But I'm not saying that use the word Hamas here, but I'm saying like there's a critical level of violence in a nation that God responds to, whatever that means. Okay. Then there's the tzaddikim who are davening on behalf of the whole nation. And that is what sets the bris into motion, right? So I think the idea is something like this, which is that when you are saying Shema Koleinu, you have to be recognizing that you're davening as part of the And in the there are lots of people crying out and davening to God in very many different ways, some good and some not good. And like there are going to be people in the that are crying out in the way that Sforno condemns, which is that they're trying to, what did he say? Seduce? Yeah, seduce him with their, they attempted to seduce me with their mouths, right? Okay. And yet God is responding to the entire nation. Why? Because of this phenomenon that the nation is, because of that bris in not the bris bin Mitzrayim, the bris in Yud Zayin, that the nation exists as an entity before God. And the tzaddikim are enough, their tefillah is enough to bring that entity before God as a whole, and then that's what God's responding to. So I don't know what this idea is, but I'm saying the takeaway is when you say Shema Koleinu, you are, hopefully you're doing the real tefillah, but what you're asking, you're recognizing that that you're asking God to hear our tefillos, and our tefillos is the nation, and the nation has many different people with many different tefillos in it. And some of them are good and some of them are bad, but God is responding to the whole nation on behalf of the people who are davening correctly there because of the relationship he has with the I know it's a really, really complicated summary, but
so not everyone may necessarily be davening,
appropriately, right? Yeah,
but there are a few people who do.
Yeah.
And it's because of those few people who are davening for the that God listens. Yeah,
that God listens to the Yeah. Now remember, that's not up until now. In our in this Wednesday night series, we were talking about individual tefillah. That God's only going to respond to, is only going to listen to if it's a worthy tefillah, right? If you ask to be Alexander the Great, he's not going to listen to that, right? But this is a new idea. This is stepping in the direction of the shiur that you want, which is about the tefillah of the tzibur. Yeah.
He's responding to the particulars, or he's responding to some aggregated.
So that's what I'm getting here, is that he's responding to the people who are davening correctly, but because of their tefillah, then that's what maintains God's relationship to the nation, the shmias tefillah of the entire nation.
And what does it mean to daven correctly?
We did that last fourth year.
As a nation. As a nation, like, what does that mean?
It's going to be the same thing we said for davening for individual needs, but you're asking God to bring that about for the whole nation, right? Like
So it's not just your personal tefillah.
Not just your personal tefillah, yeah, right. Which is why we have to realize that, like, again, like the Gra said, I keep on emphasizing that Gra, when you daven, you should not have in mind your own bakashos unless you're making your own bakashos. When you make the bakashos in the middle of brachos, you should have in mind for the am. Yeah, Ella?
So is this a way that we should be looking at the request in Shema Koleinu, or is this just a different idea about that?
Look, I can't tell you for sure. All I can do is look at the pesukim that the Buderim brings down and then say what my understanding of the pesukim is. I'm sure there are many other ways to understand these pesukim, but the way I'm understanding it is based on the Sforno, and this is what I'm getting right now. That's But
then how would it apply to like should I have in mind, or should someone have in mind that like these ideas, or is there like a practical implication that like my tefillah should be answered because
let's think about that more about how this should transform us, right? Because that's the real question, all right, is how the tefillah should transform us. Yeah. I just want to point out though, by the way, it's not so simple anymore that Tefillas Amcha Yisrael Barachamim is the wrong version. That I know we say Tefillas Kol Peh, but like there is room to say. I mean, given the way that the bracha starts off, is Shema is referencing to Am Yisrael, right? And also there's a nusach difference that some siddurs say Baruch Hashem Shomea HaTefilah, and that's not referring to all tefillah in general. That's some specific tefillah. So I don't know what, maybe that is the tefillah of Am Yisrael Barachim. I don't know. Yeah. All right. Lots to think about. That was a lot of data, but hopefully we can translate into an actionable idea next time.
Yes. So the question now is like, how do we translate?
Yeah, that's the question. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, that was a lot more complicated than I thought, but there was a lot of facts. Yeah.
Can you just like simply say that it's just not be selfish, like care about other.
That's a prerequisite, but I don't know if that's the meaning of it though. Yeah. Okay. Stop.